Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township, November 20th, 2018. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, if Pastor Craig could come on up with Bridgepoint Church, open us up in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for being the giver of all good gifts. And God, we thank you for this time of year that we can especially reflect on your goodness to us as individuals and to us as a community. And God, I pray for these men and women that have, they give of their time and their effort to lead this community. God, thank you for this wonderful community that we get to be a part of. So God, I pray for guidance and direction. And Lord, I pray that we would just continue to look for ways and find ways to just continue to move forward in the direction that you would have us to go. So Lord, bless this time tonight, this meeting. I pray that everything that's said and done will just be beneficial to moving forward in the direction that we need to go. Lord, we ask all these things tonight in your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Item 2, the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda is submitted. Support.
Okay, motion and support of Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry is absent. Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Item 3, consent agenda. The agenda committee reports. The committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the minutes of the November 13, 2018 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, the committee recommends to the full board to accept and place on file the general, savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending October 31st, 2018. D, the committee recommends to the full board to approve the 2019 meeting dates for the Bedford Township Board.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. We have no presentations tonight. Item 5, public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. Let me say happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Welcome Mr. Montree to the board. We certainly appreciate your presence here, and we know you're going to do a great job, so we're looking forward to seeing you every week here. I want to comment on 8D. I think it would be a great disservice to this community and to this county and to the state to establish any kind of marijuana establishment in this community. I've never had a good contact with anyone on marijuana, and I didn't move to Bedford Township thinking that I'm going to be living next to a place or seeing this kind of an establishment here. I was kind of surprised when that thing passed on November 6th. Disappointed, obviously, because as a former police officer, I spent most of my career dealing with people who were intoxicated, whether it be on drugs or alcohol. Both of them are dangerous and serious. And so I would hope that this board would seriously consider to opt out of any marijuana establishment in this community. Thank you.
Medbar, 8810 Newcomb Trace. I too just want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving. My dad sat in your seat for some 20 years, so I know what you guys go through from the outside, you know, as a son. So I know you guys work hard and do a wonderful thing for our community. I do want to talk about item 5 as well. I'm in favor of an ordinance to ban establishments for recreational marijuana. Why? Because it's the right thing for our community, and even more importantly, it's the right thing for our kids. Being a public school teacher for the last 23 years, I too have not seen anything good about marijuana use, alcohol use for that matter too, but here we're talking about marijuana. I lived in this community for a better part of 48 years. I grew up here, went to school here, played sports here. All my 4 kids went to school here, I raised them here, they played sports here. We go to church here, we love this community, our church loves this community, Compelled Church loves to serve, you know, as we all do, but we can't turn a blind eye to the dangers of recreational marijuana. So let me ask you a couple rhetorical questions. Do we want all our kids' test scores to go down as a public school teacher? And I know in Colorado and some of these other places that implement them, test scores are plummeting. Do we want crime in this community to go down or up? Do we want morals of this community to continue to get better or worse? And I think we all know the answer to that question, so please consider an ordinance to ban establishments from allowing recreational marijuana.
Any more comments from the public?
I'm David Gaunt, 1251 Brandywine Street here in Temperance. I'm asking the board that they approve the prohibition for marijuana establishments here in Bedford Township. You hear all the talk, it's not good. I'm requesting that let's take a look at what happens here. This is early. This is like making Bedford Township the beta taste for the rest of the state. I don't think that's good. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that we do know, but can be argued about both ways. And you know, how large of an area is this going to? Are these establishments going to bring people from? I guarantee it'll be from out of the county, and I know it's going to be very strong from Ohio. And just think about Lewis Avenue now and the way it's going to be if we put any kind of a marijuana establishment in here. It's not affecting, not putting one here, we got to keep in mind, it does not affect the citizens of this township. They can grow 12 plants if they want. They can give 2.5 ounces to somebody else. This whole thing is established, and putting this in is for the benefit of a couple businessmen to make money. And I'm willing to bet that they don't care that much about this community as we do that are standing here. So I ask you, please, don't make this the beta test for the rest of the state. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I will repeat. It's also been found that lactating mothers are passing marijuana to their breastfed babies. But I also wanted to address two other issues. I would like to voice opposition to an appointment of Kristen Barron to the EDC. There is a blatant conflict of interest with her. 2 minutes, I really don't have time to go into it, but she should not be appointed. This would not be conducive to the whole overall picture. As to the assessing department, again, I was here the other day for a half hour. I watched somebody stand at a cubby and just chew the fat. We had two very well-trained people that left that department. One left because of a hostile environment. The other was told his services were no longer needed. All this stuff is not going to fix the problem. And it's also stated under Kelly's jobs that she is to assist the supervisor and the deputy. I don't believe the assessing department should be taking calls from the supervisor's office and keeping track. There's an answering machine. They should be taking care of their own business. That should not be the assessing. And he also has it mentioned that the actions directly affect the supervisor's office and the board. That is wrong, in my opinion. It directly affects more so the planning and zoning and the treasury, because that is the only job that the township has to do, and that is to do our taxes, and we have to pay for them. So I would think the supervisor's office and the board should come off the direct effect, and that the zoning and planning and the treasury's department should be moved up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to old business, request for approval of a new staffing model and equipment for the assessing department. Alan, come on up. Alan took away, a lot was said the last meeting that this was tabled. I think this was probably 4 or 5 meetings ago now. It's been a little while. done a lot more research. I understand the board still has a little concerns about, or some concerns about budgeting and about doing actual study. So we're willing to look at all that. Ultimately, we just want what's best for the department. And Alan, I appreciate all the hard work. You have a lot to do with your job, a lot of responsibilities, and on top of trying to do a major study along the way. So I appreciate that. So let's dive right into it. If anybody has any questions for Alan, or Alan, you can kind of just give us a synopsis of what you've done.
Well, we'll start. We've had, well, first of all, I'm going to start, if you have any questions or concerns, please bring them forward. We have received an email from TC who, he really made some very strong points, and they're greatly appreciated, because we're here to make this a better department moving forward. We did miss the budgeting on our short site. Prior to me taking some time off, I had handed a packet of notes. They were pretty ugly notes that the staff, the assessing staff, pulled together to create this documentation. There's a few flaws in it, but we're going forward with that. When we were here originally, Mr. Fredericks was here. Mr. Montre's here now. Nancy was here. Nancy made it very clear to all of us that, yes, the assessing department has been ignored for a number of period of years. The job still needs to get done. We have a tremendous amount of work to do. The complexity of it has dramatically changed over the years. So the Band-Aid, as Mr. Fredericks called it, we looked at his opinions, his approach. We invited a number of individuals to come and speak with us on their input. We've had some response from Mr. Steiner, Mr. Francis, Trudy as well, on TC. We appreciate that moving forward. But what we brought here tonight is kind of where we're looking at, what we see, what we're trying to address to get away from the Band-Aid problems that we've had. We're trying to do more cross-training so that if one person leaves, another person can pick up. We're using a different model approach to the field work where Teresa that we brought in is tackling it on the computer side of it using GIS photos so that we know those properties where we're going to have a lot more work to do. We can concentrate on those with a different format, just a little different format than what we would normally, we see as a little lighter activity on the property. Under no circumstances are we picking out individuals exclusively. That's not it. That's not how we do it. We've done our sales study reviews, materials, our sales reviews. We're working on a new construction to get those wrapped up. As of right now, we've completed approximately, we will be adding approximately right now 91 plus new parcels to the roll. So we have a lot of new construction that's coming down the line. The model that we've proposed here with the budgetary and staff is a flexible. We're trying to address these. Is this the end all? It may not be. There's been some concerns that we need an outside source to come in. If that's what the board chooses to do, by all means, please do, because they may find something more that we may even need. And we need to set this and establish this for the future. There is some legislation that's in place. It may or may not affect us. But the end result is we have a lot of work in this community coming, new projects, and we need to get those filled. I'm going to address one issue in regards to Kelly as far as assisting the supervisor's office. We always have assisted the supervisor's office, any supervisor that's been here, whether it was Lamar Fredericks, Walt Wilburn, Greg Stewart. They come to us for information, and we help. That's true for every department. We work closely with the planning department, building department, treasury, maybe not so much with the clerks. They have their own issues that they need to address, and I don't want to get involved with any voter tabulation in any shape, form, or manner. But that's where we're at. And if you have any questions, please bring them forward, and we're moving on.
Well, and I just want to address the whole deal with whoever's starting the rumor that the township supervisor sends all of his phone calls to the assessing department is false. Okay, there are times when Al is at TMACOG or SEMCOG for the whole day, and I'll leave for lunch, or I'll have to go to another meeting, and they'll take the calls. Because let's be honest, 50% of our calls are, hi, I'm not sure which department I need to talk to. Could you please help me? Okay, so Kelly takes our phone calls once in a while. It might add up to an hour a month,
Yeah,
maybe.
It may. We do take calls.
So
Not-
I don't know
I'm not gonna run away
who's
from that.
doing that or starting that rumor, but it's false.
We're here for this, we are here for the residents, the taxpayers. We do provide a service. Yes, we can direct them all to the internet, or we can go right down to directly answering the phone 1 hour a day. I don't care. That's sad. As a taxpayer, I wouldn't be happy with that. And we do have
Well,
some
we
very-
want somebody to answer the phone.
Right. We have
Okay, and there are
complicated- we have
times that we're both
complicated
gone.
issues with that
And we
part,
have to, we don't want just go into a voicemail.
Right.
It's very few, far between.
Right. So that's those particular issues. But like I said, if you have any additional questions or concerns, please bring them forward, and we'll try to address those tonight.
Anybody have any questions for Al?
I'll catch the board up. Alan, I appreciate your response. I'm sorry we weren't able to work out the phone call yesterday afternoon, but the email helped me with some of the stuff that I had asked for. I didn't CC the board in that email. So the board understands, one of the things that I talked with Alan about is while the proposal addresses staffing and technology, at least from what I've seen, there's nothing that talks about or has addressed an evaluation of the process. And to me, that's one of the critical elements to analyzing this. And I realized that I think my request in my email to you was not that you do the study. That wasn't my implication. But at some level, I know the one piece that still remains for me is a look on, is there an ability or a way to improve the process for efficiency? And so far, between the 2 meetings and the literature that I've seen, that's the one question mark that still exists. And I don't know that we want to go out and pay a resource firm thousands of dollars to come in and do an analysis. I'm wondering if MTA may have a resource or a means to help in that manner. If we've compared our process to any other assessing department to look and see if we're maintaining best practice. The one thing I can tell you for certain is this: I've never done assessing, I've never worked in assessing, and I'm not going to try to tell you, how to run a department. But before I can look a voter in the face and say, this is why I voted in the affirmative, I have to be able to understand the vote. And because the process piece is missing, I'm not in a position to vote in the affirmative tonight. So I wanted to catch the board up. That was kind of the gist of my email.
I would just like to add to that, if we're going to do a study for the assessing department, and we're going to look into MTA or somebody coming in from the outside, we need to do the whole township hall in general. All departments need to be looked at. If that's the case, why not do it all at one time? Because there's been questions along the line for a lot of departments, who needs what? And it always comes down to, well, we've got to trust the person that's running the department. You're right, we do. But if we're going to do the study for assessing, let's do it for the whole township.
Well, and I think, and I realize you used the word just as an example. To me, this has absolutely nothing to do with trust. It has everything to do with just sometimes when you do something every day, having a fresh set of eyes analyze how and why you're doing it is just a healthy thing. I think in the private sector, that's something that's done on a regular basis just because it improves your process, and it's a good double check that you're doing the best with the greatest number of efficiencies. And as you know, I mean, you've been at town hall far longer than I have. The biggest problem that we have is that, with our charter township, we don't retain a lot of the tax dollars. And so we operate on a lean budget. And unfortunately, with each passing year, that lean is going to become more capitalized because we're going to continue to feel the effects from it. So I don't disagree. Maybe there is a time and a reason. I don't know if MTA can come in and do it. But I definitely think we have to look at process because it's just too big of a piece to overlook and say, yeah, we're just going to add staff and buy some technology and hope it works. I don't think that's quite the answer that people are looking for.
I just want to correct one thing. You said charter?
Yeah, I did, sorry.
I know you
misspoke.
meant, you meant general law.
General,
Okay, I know you
excuse
did.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, or were you not done?
No, I was absolutely done. Thank you. And thank you, Alan, for the
Francis?
response to the email.
This is an important issue. This really is, the assessing department is why townships were created in the first place. What was that for? It was to assess the property and collect the tax. That's how townships were created, and that's their only original duty. So this is very important to Bedford. We want to do it right. We need, as a board and community, to supply that department with whatever it needs to do a superb job. And nothing against Alan or anybody in the department. I'm just wondering, would it make any sense to at least talk about it with MTA and maybe the Monroe County Equalization Department, Mike Wilford?
We've tried with the equalizing department. They're not in a position to come and, they've been here, Mike was here, spent a couple of days here, I think.
Yep.
And they're not in a position to come back.
There's been some changes.
Something happened
some changes
legally
at the
with
county.
another township or something, and, yeah, it would be MTA or an outside firm to come in and do a study. But we've spoke with Mike Wolford after the last meeting, and Mike is all for this model. We showed it to him, we talked to him about it, and
He is a resident of Bedford Township. He does have his right to speak. The biggest issue has always been for this department for a number of years. We did a major reduction about 10 years ago because of the economy and the shift that took place. And we've always been in a position that we're always basically running like a fire engine crew all the time. We have complicated issues that take more than 5 minutes. One of the issues I worked on today, or this last week, was an issue that's bounced back over a 14-year period that I've been here. It all came down to an easement in a piece of landlocked property. Somewhere along the line, a private easement got slapped on the deed with a public easement. Well, there's no record anywhere that I can find that it is a public easement. So we have to look at it as a private easement, which doesn't allow that property as it is right now to be developed. We're trying to address those ugly properties with a file that's being created so that the next time this comes up on this particular property, we just pull it up and say, these are the issues, instead of having to do a complete audit of the whole entire parcel and history of the deeds. It's a big draw. The
Mr.
addressing of bringing the MTA, if that's what you'd like to do, by all means.
Trudy has a question.
Well, it was about the MTA. Nancy had brought that up at the last meeting when you brought, and she said it's a free study.
So, by all means.
I would love to see them come in. Heck, if they want to analyze my department, maybe I can get somebody else.
Yeah.
That's what I say, we might not like the study, it might come back with 5 full-time people.
Right.
But it would be a study
You
from
might not
another
like
set of
what-
eyes.
No, I
that
agree.
Right,
Give us
right,
that
by all means.
information that say, yes, you
Here.
need this many people, you need this, you need that,
Go out, chase the
or
numbers.
you're gonna,
Well, for the sake of time, if that's everybody, unless anybody else wants to talk about this, we can table it, and they could go to MTA. First thing tomorrow, you could give them a call, and we could start the study process then, and then come back with that. Mr. Steiner?
You know, the MTA might also not just come back with the staffing recommendations based on what we do. Like Trudy said, she'd be glad to see it. The study could come back and say, well, gee, Trudy needs 1 or 2, you need 1 or 2, Paul needs 1 or, you know. But that's where it's our job then to look back and say, okay, we can say that's what they say, but it's still our job to keep our within our means too.
Right.
So they may also come back with not only, okay, we see that we think you need X amount of people. They may have some good processes of not only where we're at today, where they think we need to be, but they're probably an excellent resource of what other people have really done to get there. I know that you've worked really hard and you've come a long way with really projecting some of the things we need to try to do to get there. I think there's probably more we can do just to make sure that if we do put anybody on, that we've got the right thing in the right place, the right numbers that we're using. Aside from that, just a couple questions on some of the stats that we have. I just wanted to look at a couple of these months in here. On your fieldwork stat sheet,
Yes.
looks like June, July, and August, granted, you said you had 2 people doing the field work. Is that the time frame when Pete was brought on? Is that why that increased so much?
Yes. Pete was here and so was Josh. He was starting to exit out.
And Josh was working very few hours at that time, too, I think. He was-
Yeah.
Okay, and then granted, we really haven't hit bad weather. Then I see a significant drop again in September and October.
Yep. That was the loss of Josh. Also, the part-time gentleman that we have has other obligations as too. So we've been working with his schedule. He comes in and he's a go-getter and he goes out and does what we request. So that's showing that second person, that field person, is a big plus. We have brought Teresa in, and she has also started to do the data entry, drawings of the new construction properties, and also the GIS analysis that we're starting to implement to get those numbers up and rolling. As far as November goes right now, we've had a change in the weather, and the holidays are definitely into play with that. As far as the deeds and the sales right now, my understanding, we're a couple weeks behind on deed information from the county because of the number of properties that have closed. So,
And then the other thing too, and it's hard to determine 100%, but there's opinions, there's also facts. But I have heard internally and externally about, doesn't seem like we have the people in the field enough that should be. I see right now, if we went to the new model, we'd have 4 people that would be inside and only 2 outside in the field.
no, the 4 people will be out in the field as well. We're transitioning into, Christine and myself, we're the base on the industrial and commercial side of it. The residentials and sales side, new construction, that's where the 2 field people come into play. Teresa comes into play. We're doing the GIS analysis and permit entry, also assisting with land division materials as well as Kelly is too. So we're trying to make this thing bloom or blend so that we get a better run.
You have to keep in mind, I've heard people, make it sound like these 4 people are just sitting there. I mean, these people, I know, I'm not putting words in
Let
your
me
mouth.
finish though, please. Let me finish. I mean, I never said they were just sitting there.
No, but I've heard that. I didn't say you were saying that.
But I'm just saying, I've heard, that's why I said there's a difference between fact and perception. And maybe it's one or the other, maybe it's somewhere in between, I don't know. And that's up to Alan as the leader of that department to make that call. The one thing too is, at some point, if we do go with the model, and you're saying that there's gonna be up to 4 people in the field, then that's the kind of guarantees we would need too, is like, we're gonna see it. I think it would be good, at some point, take this similar model here on the field stats and break this down by individual too, and show how much they're actually in the field. I think that would maybe ease some minds as well.
We can do that in the future.
So, okay.
We're at the point right now that the individuals that we do have, we are utilizing them. We're at the point now that we need to get our numbers buttoned up and get our roll together and get everything wrapped up between now and March board review. One other thing I'm going to mention is we are looking for an individual for the board of review. So if you know of any individual that might be interested in filling out an application being considered for a board member, we do need an alternate. Just bringing that to your attention. No, we're not a perfect department by any stretch of imagination. We have just a lot of parcels to visit, 2,700. It's a huge number, and it's not an easy task. People get burned out in the field. People get burned out in the office.
I heard the comment tonight too. I sat there and watched somebody sitting there chewing the cud for an hour. You don't know what they're talking about. You don't know what they're doing. I could say the same thing about any department. If I just look across the hall and to me, they're just sitting there. I don't know what they're doing, but I can assume they're not doing nothing if I'd like to. But I could tell you, every time I walk over there, I mean, people are working. They got a stack of things they have to do. They can't keep up with it. Alan, I come in here half the time on Saturdays, he's here. I mean, they're working hard. I get what you guys are saying. I'm not disagreeing that you need a study. I mean, look at all the information you've had the last 3 times they've been here. Outside of a study and hard numbers, it sounds like if you just had the one part-time person for the field worker, it really wouldn't change the budget.
No,
Not drastically,
Not
like if you had the
drastic.
second one. The second,
Right.
I think the first one would go 9,000 over, and then the second one was, 30 or whatever.
Correct. And that second one, give me a second here, let me switch my chart I'm looking at. On the bottom there, the second field individual, this is a position that, yes, we would like to bring on. As of where we're at right now, if we could, we would. But if we have to go on with an additional analysis, that's fine too. the one issue that we need to get addressed, or basically two. We have Teresa, who is part-time appraiser, seasonal, and our field person as well as a seasonal. If we can establish these two individuals as a part-time position as of right now, because we may lose these people and we're going to be right back where we were. And it's extremely hard to go back down to zero. And we have work that needs to be done.
Anybody else have any questions for Alan?
Well, Alan, what would you say is like, for you to go out an average day, like just on average, very general, like how many parcels should you be doing a day?
On an average day, an individual can get, a full-time person can actually get between 16 and 21. It depends on the mood of the individual at the home. Some people are very talkative. Some people aren't talkative. Some people are, average is 16. However, from start to finish of a record card, on the average, it's about 8 to 10 cards a day. So typically with 2,700 cards, it takes about 337 days in a year. We typically have about 34 weeks in a year, or 40 weeks in a year, to get the job done. Because we have to get our data entry, our ECS, our land studies, our border reviews, our tax tribunals.
So each of these, like on the fieldwork stats, those are a start to finish?
No, that's just the field work. That's just the field visit.
So, well, that's what, I guess what I'm looking at on the.
That doesn't include the data entry. When you do the prep work, the field work, and the data entry, it breaks down to about 8 cards a day.
Because April and May, we're getting 3 and 4. And like for these 7 months?
Typically, April, our role is locked down, and we're transitioning and cleaning up from the previous role, getting established to the new role. It's a transitional period. The state of Michigan typically approves our role in May, and at that time, we've just turned our role over, and like I said, cleaning our books up from the past year, getting our books ready for the new year. When it comes to the field staff, no, they're not out in the field the full year round because of weather conditions. Those individuals, we still have work and other assignments that we can address and have them helping with the whole role as a whole. It's kind of a misconstrued fact that all they do is sit there and twiddle their thumbs. It's not the case. We have more work than we know what to do with.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just like, I'm looking at numbers and going, we're getting 3 a day in these first months. And then we're tripling that in the summer. And then like for these, I mean, outside of the TBD 5 months, we're still half. So we're getting 10%. We're getting 10% in having that goal 20. I'm just like.
Right. The recommendation by the state is 20%. That puts us at approximately 2,700 parcels. When I first started here, we had just, when Lamar Fredericks was here, my first year, we had reached the first time 10% mark. Shortly after that, it came up the fact they started pushing 20%. The state of Michigan would like to see us on these properties once every 5 years, 5 to 6 years. The situation that develops with an appraiser on the property that much, people start to shut down. They stop improving their homes, putting additions on, deck sheds. So there's kind of a rhythm there that you got to be careful with as well. With Prop 1 that just took place, I'm sure next year we're going to see a big increase. I'm going to switch here for just a second. We're going to see a big increase of detached garages, utility buildings, and sheds, and that's just made our job much more dangerous.
Anybody have any more questions? Mr. Steiner?
Just one last one. You and I discussed with your team when we met about the Microsoft Surface Pro computers that would be in the field work. And I don't remember if we came up with any numbers. We said that some of the data entry that takes place currently after they come back to the office, how much would these computers do while they're in the field to eliminate some of that work when they get back? 20%, 10%, 50%?
Well, the key is having that individual in place that's been trained and using the equipment efficiently. Typically, you could probably, let me do a quick number here, probably add an hour to an hour and a half more in the field a day.
So I'm saying, how much work would it reduce in the office, though?
In the office,
I mean, I know I know I'm just throwing a question at you. I mean, do you think it could reduce 10, 15% of their time if you're saying they could get another hour and a half in the field?
yeah.
So maybe 10,
You might,
10 to
you
15.
you might get 11, you might get a 17. It
Okay.
depends on the individual.
So in that range.
Right. The big thing with the group of individuals that we have here, right now, they make the job look easy because they dive in. And they're very good. We're very lucky to have the level of individuals we have in this department. And it's nice to see that. We haven't had that always. We have issues that we have to work with, but overall, it's a good core group of individuals. And the residents as well. They take pride in their work, and they're good people. Not saying we haven't had other people that were good, but sometimes people have to move on to other opportunities. And
Anybody have any more questions for Mr. Matlow? I look for a motion.
So the MTA study, that's free?
Yes.
That's not even like I would make a motion to table and to be able to do that.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion and seconded by Ms. Hirschberger. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Thank you, Alan.
thank you very much tonight for your input. We'll go forward. I notice Nancy's not here tonight. Nancy always has some suggestive input, and there can be some challenging questions. So I hope everything's going well with her and her family. So thank you tonight, and everyone have a good holiday.
Okay, you too, thank you. Item 8B, request to accept a donation from ITC for $3,500.
We're
ITC
skipping 8A.
Oh, I did skip 8A, I'm sorry. Item 8A, request for approval of voucher for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $63,183.69. Fire District, $8,440.70. Police Fund, $1,460.80. Park Fund, $4,563.83. Library Fund, $441.65. Water Revenue Fund, $5,000. Lewiston Estates SAD, $13,561.25. Downtown Development Authority, $5,871.26. Sewer O&M Fund, $7,126. Trust and Agency Fund, $14,610.50, for a grand total of $124,259.68.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Item 8B, request to accept a donation from ITC for $3,500. ITC is the transmission company that is replacing all the double wooden poles all through the community, mainly on the Samaria end, by Pickard Road and all that. They're replacing them with a single steel monopole. They have a community department that has money set aside for community development, and I've talked to, I think, everybody in here at one point in time of come up with some ideas of what we could do with the money. I got a call last week from the Bedford Junior High School that there's a couple of students, one in particular, that had a hard time getting from the junior high to the library and ended up going in the street in his wheelchair. That's the last thing we need is an accident. So they asked me if I could assist them in getting concrete poured from the junior high to the library. And then it popped in my head that we have this money from ITC, so I called the concrete company to quote. It's roughly $3,000 for all the concrete. So I'm in the process right now of talking to some of the union labor companies to see if we can get some of the labor donated. I've talked to another company that's going to donate the mesh. So I'm working on it to see if we can make this happen in partnership with the junior high. I'm working with their principal over there. And then the other 500 would be for a police memorial, if everybody's okay with it, for like a stone in front of where the police are. We have one right now currently for the fire department, one for the veterans, and I thought it'd be cool for the other corner to have some sort of monument for the police on their corner. So that would be roughly 3,500. If we don't accept the money, it could go away. So I know, like I've said, I've talked to the park board about different ideas of stuff, and nobody's really gotten back to me. I looked into a new LED sign for out front. Those are about $30,000, so that was off the table. I thought it'd be really cool for an LED sign, so this is the best I could come up with. I thought it'd be really cool to partner with them and get concrete. I walked it over there. The ground's bad. It's got moles all through it, and so.
Mr. Chairman, I have no problem in accepting the donation and thank them for it. I don't have any problem with the sidewalk idea because that's a safety issue. Why don't we proceed and do the sidewalk first and see if there's going to be any excess funds?
Well, there has to be. They designated it at 3,000 and then 500 for the monument. But we can do that. But there's 500 strictly for the monument and 3,000 strictly for the concrete. So it's two separate projects.
Well,
But I could talk to them, I'm sure. if it
my
went
point
over.
was, one is a safety issue and the other one is not. Maybe we ought to look at safety issues first, and we haven't thought about it. Why don't we think about it before we commit to that? And
Okay.
all we do tonight is accept the donation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, and we are very thankful for it.
Set a motion.
Yeah, I move that we gratefully accept the donation of $3,500 from ITC Corporation and thank them for it.
Second.
Motion, support of Mr. Clemens, discussion?
So that's all it is acceptance. It's not a,
Well, I mean, I told them what it would be for, but they wouldn't care if we changed it up.
okay.
But the estimates that I've gotten is that I'm gonna get everything volunteered for the project, other than the concrete's at cost from Stevens. So, okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0. Item 8C, request to appoint members to the Economic Development Committee. Mr. Tim Lake, come on up. Appreciate you being here. We have worked with Tim on this initiative since we first brought it up to you guys. We had a group of people that have met regularly, Mr. Jenkins, Aaron Weens, and James Brunt on and off, but we have met, we got to the point where we took applications, we all went through them as a group, and these are the people that ended up being recommended. So if anybody has any questions, Tim is here to answer them. I'm personally excited about the group. We're doing the same thing at the I-75 corridor study with the Pillar team, just on a bigger level. So I think it's us getting ahead of the game, preparing for that company that is in California or another state that looks at our website and can see these properties that are undeveloped and know a little bit about them before they get here.
Yep.
So.
And solving any potential deficiencies that we might have, or looking at those opportunities to fix deficiencies to make them more marketable and/or shovel-ready. So, yes. And the team was kind of strategically thought of with certain, I guess, skill sets that these folks would have that would benefit what we're trying to do as a whole. So, which is a similar process, again, that we use with the Monroe County Link Plan as we strategically put folks together.
Mr. Francis?
How many members do you plan to have in this committee? Because there are 6 on here tonight, and how many are you planning to have?
Plan on having 7. Why?
I think we talked about 7 being a good number, yes.
I was going to say it needs to be an odd number.
It's going to be more of a working group. Of course, this committee won't do anything, they're not spending any money or they're not having to vote. It's strictly a strategic and a working group that'll bring recommendations back to the township board if that's necessary.
The other comment I've had is there's a couple of applicants that I'm wondering why they were not chosen. They're very knowledgeable in the area and seem like it'd help. the ones that were chosen, some of those resumes are tremendous. They're very talented people. It's just hard to pick. And the two that I was speaking about one was John Krakoff, who I've known forever, and Arvid Shaw, who's you saw his resume.
All 5 pages.
He's got more credentials than anybody in the township, maybe. And it would be nice if they could be on it. But then if you're only picking 6 at this point in time, well, who would you move
You can-
where? And
You can add both of them if you want. It's not going to hurt. It would only help. It's just, this is the people that we came up with. You know, you've got Deborah Duke, who's got a really good resume as well. And, you know, I spoke with both. I talked to John extensive, you know, quite a bit about it. And he said if it works out, cool. If it doesn't, you know, so, Mr. Steiner?
I mean, I concur with Mr. Francis. I was talking about the same in general. But I do have a question, and I know that current development that we could possibly move forward with is primarily going to take place on this side of the township. But I'm real curious as to why all the applicants seem to be from this side of the township and nobody from the other side of the township. Did we push for people on this side of the township only? I mean, Arvin's the only one that I believe is really the other side of the township.
Those are the applicants we got, and that's kind of how it worked out. We didn't even, until you
No thought
caught it,
process
there
to
was no.
that, circumstances, I guess.
What it was.
We're just curious because it just seems odd that nobody from the other side.
The only other thing I would add is if you circle back to when Mr. Lake was here last time, the comment I made was we defer because obviously Tim has done a stellar job with the county economic development, and this group is going to have to blend and mesh with that group. And so to me, if the group, and we talked yesterday, and Tim was very excited about the group. You know, I can tell you that most of these people on here that I know, I think are very bright people. A number of them I don't know, and I wouldn't second guess the process. You know, if we remember, we said go develop a group, and unless there's a huge problem. I also like the idea of those 2 names possibly being included, because I think there's some historical base there that might prove beneficial. But thank you for the time in developing this.
I don't think it hurt to add them. If we want to add them, and
Absolutely
we can
not.
call them, and if they decline, they decline. If they want to come on, it won't hurt.
Sure. We can always use the extra help. So you're going to have ebbs and flows with people's schedules. Again, they're volunteering their time, so we know we're not going to get them all the time, so sure.
I know Dr. Carl Schultz, he was interested in being on it as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
He's a key individual we'd like to get because he represents K-12 education,
Yeah.
which is an important component of what we're trying to do. So it's along with property development, site development, there's elements of community development that goes along with economic development too. So, and certainly our education is a key component. You'll see Paul Nolan on there from the community college as part of this whole strategy that we had, so.
Mr. Montry?
Mr. Lake, do you suggest a cap of some sort, like for how many people you would have on a committee like this?
I don't
Or
think
is
there's
that-
any magic number. We don't want it to get unruly. You know, I'm gonna be managing these folks and their time and what they have to do to make sure that we're moving forward. So we certainly wouldn't want a committee of 20 by any means. But managing 7 to 9 is not an issue. Again, they all won't be doing the same thing at the same time, more than likely as we move forward.
And just so everybody knows, we posted in the BBA, Facebook, Bedford Press, and the government channel. So we hit all the spots you could hit in Bedford. So the BBA, actually, when they shot it to all their members, we actually got quite a few applications from that. I think a few or something, so yeah.
My other question would just be like, talking about moving forward, how does something like this, like, if someone leaves, or how do you add, or how long is a tenure for like a committee like this?
Well, if somebody leaves, we go back
Is it
to
just
the
kind of, that's
application
the only
pool,
time
come
somebody,
back to the
if
board
somebody leaves?
to add a member. I mean, I don't think there is a term on this as of right now.
That's not, there is no terms. It's not structured with the exact number of people. We want to be flexible and strategic. If somebody comes along that we can use and is willing to serve, we'd like to come to the township board and make that recommendation to you, to put them on the committee. And inversely, if somebody leaves, has to leave for whatever the reason might be, and we don't need to replace that person, then, we wouldn't replace that person.
Just to let you know, they ran. Mr. Francis?
Is this going to be a committee of the board that requires Open Meetings Act compliance? I think it would
If
be.
the board creates the committee, they have to follow it, yes.
The other question is, do you anticipate reactivating the EDC corporation that we have?
No, this is separate from that.
Okay.
Ms. Ersberg?
I'd just like to request that, I know we want Dr. Carl Schwartz on, but if he can't, I would like Mike Smith on. I just think we need some kind of representation from the schools.
I mean, we can put whoever we want on it. I mean, like I said, I don't know, 10 people's getting up there. I know Dr. Carl expressed the interest to be in on it,
Yeah.
but I had talked to Mike Smith about it as well, and he's interested as well.
Well, I've worked with Mike, and he's great, okay, so certainly a good guy to work with. The superintendent's probably going to have some additional knowledge and with what's happening in state level and things like that, that might be a little bit more beneficial than what Mike may be able to help, but certainly if Carl's not able to do it because of his time commitments and Mike is, that's great. So, we do need somebody representing K-12.
Well, why don't we start with these 6, because we have the names
We'd
on
like to
there.
get going if
And we'll bring back a few more to the next meeting or the meeting after. But at least this can get us going, get the mission statement going, get a meeting going.
Does anyone have a problem with adding Arvind Shaw and John Krakoff to the list right now?
I don't. No.
No,
That would
I'm
be
good
a
with that.
total of 8. And then if we had one representative from the school, that would be an uneven number, 9.
Right.
And I think we ought to aim at an uneven number.
Do we want to name a representative from this board?
Are we sure we don't want terms on this?
Tim, do you
All
think
boards
it-
have ever
I'm
had,
sorry.
all our boards have always had term limits.
why don't
Well,
we-
if I recall correctly, when we first proposed this, I think we are term limited to a year. We had to come back to you in a year's time from when you said go ahead with the EDC and give you a report out about the activity that we've done. We'd have to go back in the minutes and double check that, but my recollection is that that was made part of the motion to go ahead and form the EDC committee. So what I would recommend is that you let us get formulated, come back in a year, and then we can, at that point in time, if everything is going well, you're happy with the service that's being provided by this volunteer committee, and you want to continue it, then we could actually formalize it more with term limits and those type of things. And maybe stagger those so we,
So we
At
could
that
put
point in
like a
time.
one-term on this for a review.
pardon me?
We could put a one-year term
Yeah, I
with
think
review.
I'm fine with that.
I think you did, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you can make it part of the motion anyways if we didn't.
Sure.
so.
Yeah, that would be better.
Somebody want to
yeah.
make a motion to add the 2 people and we'll
Move forward?
move forward?
Add 2 or 3.
I start with 2 and then we'll talk to the.
I move that we add to the list Arvind Shaw and John Krakoff.
I'll second,
Motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
yes.
Mr. Steiner?
And that's our recommendation for tonight. Mr. Francis, would you accept a friendly amendment to contact Dr. Schultz and see if he is interested, and that would be number 9 potentially?
Well, I thought maybe he already had been.
He is
I agree
interested. I've talked to him.
we need somebody representing the school.
But I mean, to see if he could still do it, based on his schedule.
Did you mention the one-year term to come back for review?
Yeah, you didn't hear it?
No, sorry.
It's added now, Trudy.
Okay. Just
Okay,
making sure.
Would you call the roll, please?
Can I add one more thing?
Oh.
Maybe not an amendment or anything, just how do you move forward? Does it need to be a recommendation from someone from the board to fill a spot? Or how is that in a year? how do you re-staff that board? Like,
We
what is
might
the-
not have to.
What is the process?
The objective might be done. And if it's not, then we can
Reappoint
continue
them.
it on, reappoint
Reappoint
them.
them.
Any
Just
year-
by the board then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that'll be,
That group, this group makes no decisions.
they'll make the
only-
recommendation
Yeah,
whether
but
to keep.
what, like, it's more of the, well, we all know different people that it's, like, that I just think, like, foreseeing it as something that, do you need to have that? Like, it's gonna be something that comes up. There's 3 people, we already went, well, what about this person, what about this person? That's what I'm just thinking, like, how do you make sure that that's not, like, that you actually have some sort of process for it? You know what I'm saying? I just don't know.
If you would allow, again, the year's latitude to kind of go through this process and let maybe this group of folks come back with those recommendations to you about how to formalize this board, so that we know how to work best together, so that we get action things done, we'd appreciate that opportunity, I think.
And you
So-
oversee you oversee that whole board too, correct?
I'm going to be acting as staff to the board, yes.
Okay.
Under our agreement that we have with Bedford Township, so we'll act as staff to that
Aaron
board.
Weems has said it, and when
And-
we need him as an expert, we could call upon him to come to the meetings as well, so.
And we'll be able, our office will be able to provide full-time, staffing, basically. So when a project has to get done, something has to happen in between meetings and that type of thing, we'll make sure that that gets done.
And then in a year, if we find other people that want to go on it, we can always switch them around if we want to.
Do whatever you want.
Do you like kind of go through the
Cut the
same,
whole
go through
committee
the
out,
same
you can-
process
Right.
and
Do whatever you
reapply? Each person reapplies?
We could. It'll be a board
That's
decision.
that's what I'm just like thinking
Yeah.
through.
Okay, just call the roll, please.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Tim, thank you for being here, I appreciate it. Item 8D, discussion and possible request for approval of prohibition of marijuana establishment ordinance. Mr. Goldsmith, this is Ms. Tinneberry's agenda item. She's not here tonight, so if you would like to explain it and go through it.
Sure, be happy to, Mr. Supervisor. As the board and everyone else knows, what's been commonly referred to as Proposal 1 has passed. It's a voter initiative or an initiation of legislation. It's called the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. If everything goes as planned, it will become effective 10 days from this coming Monday, the 26th of November. The 26th of November is projected to be the date that the election results will be certified by the State Board of Canvassers. So if that happens on the 26th or before, but probably the 26th, by state constitution, 10 days after certification of the election results, this initiative becomes state law. This initiative, in many respects, will preempt local regulation, but the initiative in Section 6 does provide local units of government the ability to, I'll just quote it for you verbatim, Section 6, subparagraph 1, except as provided in Section 4, a municipality may completely prohibit or limit the number of marijuana establishments within its boundaries. And you might say, well, what's a marijuana establishment? That's defined in the Act in Section 3, subparagraph H, states marijuana establishment means a marijuana grower, marijuana safety compliance facility, marijuana processor, marijuana micro business, marijuana retailer, marijuana secure transporter, or any other type of marijuana-related business licensed by the department. Licensing will be handled by LARA, by the state. And as you can see by Section 6, the township and any other local unit of government may completely prohibit or limit the number of marijuana establishments. In consultation with staff and with the supervisor, I prepared an ordinance for the board's consideration this evening, and that ordinance is entitled the Bedford Township Prohibition of Marijuana Establishments Ordinance. If the board chooses to adopt this ordinance, you would be prohibiting all marijuana establishments within the geographical confines of Bedford Township as permitted by the act. So that's for the board's consideration, whether or not for this community, this township board decides to prohibit marijuana establishments. It's perfectly permissible. It's provided for in the act. When this act was being put together, this is one of the vestiges, if you will, of local control that's left to all local municipalities specifically.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mr. Goldsmith, Mr. Francis?
Not necessarily a question, but this is the essence of the prohibition, is to prohibit the facilities to be set here, which is a commercial operation. This doesn't affect medical marijuana use, which I think we should allow, and we have in the past spoken about that. But recreational use, in my mind, brings a lot of baggage with it that I'm not ready to accept right now. And I don't even think the state's thought it through. They don't have rules and recommendations on how you handle it, how do you administer it, how do you police it.
Well,
You can't even, I've been told and read that you can't even deposit the money from your sales in a bank, because the bank can't take the money. Now, what does that do? That forces the operation to be underground, and isn't that just what we're trying to prohibit, is underground? So there's a lot of open items yet to be resolved, and I think it would be prudent for our township and in every other township, frankly, to prohibit it until those answers are there.
The banking regulations come into play because the federal government does not recognize the use or sale, possession of marijuana to be legal. So that's that aspect of it. The act has been passed, so people will be able to grow 12 plants for recreational use, possess 2.5 ounces. It's spelled out in the act. I won't go into the details. That's preempted by this act, by this voter initiative. But this act does give local units of government the authority to prohibit marijuana establishments within that local unit of government. And primarily, I think what you may be concerned with, Paul, is retail establishments, and that's one of the establishments that's defined in the act that would be prohibited from setting up shop in Bedford Township if you adopt this ordinance. This ordinance can be amended at any time by the board, just like any other general code ordinance. It could be eliminated at any time by the township board if the township board then felt that that was in the best interest for the public health, safety, and welfare of the township residents. But as of right now, and I'm not a voting member, but I think it is a wise move, would be a wise move, at least until we see what regulations are promulgated at a minimum, to see what happens with all of this. But I can say with 100% certainty that you have the authority to do it. It's not preempted by state law. This law gives the town, it's contemplated, and it gives the township the authority to prohibit marijuana establishments from within the ordinance. It has no impact on medical marijuana. That too is a voter initiative. That stands on its own law. Doesn't have anything to do with you prohibiting these types of establishments that are defined and created under this act.
Mr. Steiner?
Well, I still believe in the federal law, so I'm going to stick with that. Also, as stated in previous meetings, let's just say that we decided to allow these type of facilities within Bedford. Once they start, you'll never take them away. By going the route of the current proposed prohibition ordinance, that means that someday, if it's warranted, if somebody comes up with a good enough reason and there's a board that believes that that may be the right thing to do someday, they have the right to make that vote someday. They can make the change then, but again, if we let it go now, and we decide 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road that we don't want it, you're done. They're already established. You can't take it away. You can't shut the business down, as long as they're operating within the legal guidelines of what was just voted upon. So, and again, the research, you hear true facts and you hear made-up facts, and the internet has both. And some of the things I've seen and the numbers, and believe me, it's not always just the numbers that you see published on the internet. I do listen closely to our law enforcement community. I listen to our schools and our leaders at our schools, what's happening within our kids going to our schools. I also happen to see just how much our fire department takes in based on issues with drugs and emergency calls. There's drugs, there's, whether, it doesn't say what they are, but I mean, some's marijuana related, some's, higher levels of drugs, some is alcohol related, a little bit of everything. And it all starts somewhere. And people can disagree or agree with me, but I've seen it. It does start generally with the lower end drug and then moves into the higher end. Most people don't start at the high end. So I'm in agreement with this, the prohibition proposal that's on the table tonight.
Mr. Francis?
If no one has anything else to add, I'd like to make a motion. Is that in order?
Just a quick question I had of Mr. Goldsmith. I had asked, and I just wanted to make sure I had asked in front of the whole board. There's nothing about the ordinance that prohibits an individual under the state law. We're just addressing commercial enterprise within the township of Bedford, correct?
Yes.
Commercial establishments.
Yes, well, you look at the definition of what an establishment is, which I read.
Yes, sir.
That's what you're prohibiting.
Okay.
You're not, you don't have the authority to prohibit an individual's cultivation or use. That's preempted by state law. You do have the authority to prohibit establishments. That's what you would be adopting if you adopted this ordinance this evening.
All right, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Mr. Steiner?
Just one more thing to add to, and I re-verified it with our clerk's office that Bedford Township had a majority that did vote no on the proposal.
Any more discussion? Questions, comments?
I do,
Mr. Montre?
for Mr. Goldsmith. Can you explain section 6 and then 5, number 5 under section 6? Because between the,
Sure. Well, let's just read it. Section 6, subparagraph 5, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay, let's read it so we know what we're talking about. A municipality may not adopt an ordinance that restricts the transportation of marijuana through the municipality or prohibits a marijuana grower, a marijuana processor, and a marijuana retailer from operating within a single facility or from operating at a location shared with a marijuana facility operating pursuant to the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. So I understand why you would have a question with that. If we didn't prohibit marijuana establishments, then we couldn't further regulate them under subsection 5. In other words, if we didn't, a popular term is opt-out, if we didn't adopt this ordinance and prohibit all establishments, then we couldn't do those things under subsection 5. In other words, for instance, a marijuana retailer could operate within a single facility or from operating at a location shared with a marijuana facility operating pursuant to the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. We adopted a resolution and the board decided not to, under the Marijuana Medical Facilities Act, not to allow any one of the 5 facilities. What that section is saying is that if you didn't adopt this ordinance, you couldn't further regulate it by saying, no, you can't operate together, okay? Does that make sense to you?
well, does that mean that they can, even, if we adopt this, does that mean they can, like the second part of that paragraph, that they can, a grower, processor, and retailer may operate within a single facility?
No.
Okay,
No,
that was my
Yeah,
clarification.
because of two things. If you adopt this ordinance, then you're prohibiting all marijuana establishments under this act within Bedford Township. Secondly, you've already decided as a board to not allow any one of the 5 facilities that are allowed under the
From the medical?
the legislation, okay? The Medical Marijuana Facilities Act.
Okay.
Okay? So the answer to your question is no. There won't be anything like that.
Okay.
Marijuana can be grown under the medical marijuana voter initiative pursuant to those terms. Marijuana can be grown by individuals for individual use, or they can give it away. That's specified in this act, but you won't have, if you adopt this ordinance, you're saying there will be no marijuana establishments within Bedford Township.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mr. Goldsmith? Go ahead, Mr. Francis.
Hearing none, I move that this board approve and adopt the Bedford Township Prohibition of Marijuana Establishments Ordinance as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
I would just like to say like a little bit before we vote. It's FDIC. I've like looked at this stuff like crazy since it passed, just like, and then getting the packet and everything. It's like, because of perceptions and facts like that is like placed, as well as I've been looking at intentions versus what actually happens. Like, you're literally prohibition is in the title. How well did prohibition of alcohol work, or did it actually do the opposite of its intention? And even with, if you didn't want kids to do something, did the opposite of what you intended actually happen? And that's what I've been digging in and like reading history on prohibition in dry counties and trying to dig in and find information on what is actually happening in the opt-out counties in Colorado. This is not a cut and dry thing as much as you would like it to be. I think it's a thing that should be treated very carefully, like anything. I think a good analogy, like maybe even for this board, is like socialism. Okay, are you against free health care because you're against socialism? No. You just know that that's how you think it's going to work doesn't necessarily work. And that's a nice for not how much I don't want like the township to go that way. I just wanted to kind of say that piece before we voted, just to be making sure that we're very, very thoughtful on like that you don't blindly make a move thinking you're doing something helpful that may long-term not be what you intended.
Well, keep in mind, we wouldn't be dry. You could still smoke it, you could still grow it, so it's not really comparable to prohibition, because prohibition, you couldn't drink alcohol, period. You could still smoke it and grow it,
Give it away.
give it away. I mean, so you still have to be 21 to do it. The only thing that this says, you can't have a business.
Well,
If Erie has a business,
I've
if Erie
looked at
opts
that
in,
too.
you can go to Erie, you can buy it, you can come over here, you know what I'm saying?
And like, I don't know, I can't find the data in a couple days of digging to find, will that increase people moving in places where it's completely illegal, moving into our neighborhoods to sell it out of their house? Because it's a close distance with our proximity to another state where it's completely illegal. Does that make us more vulnerable for those kinds of things to happen, it's not what you intended, but I would think it's like, it's a real, I don't think it's as cut and dry as we'd like it to be. And I just wanted to kind of like provoke thought before we voted on it, not that, because I don't know. I don't know the answer one way or the other. But to make sure that it's not, no, we don't want that, making sure that you're looking beyond intention of a law, because sometimes, like prohibition as a law and its intentions, it didn't work as intended. And I think it's wise to look at history and be cautious as we go through. Thankfully, and I agree, as a local municipality, you do have that freedom to be able to go, nope, not here, and I think that's where it goes. And I think it's not like prohibition, I don't think. I think it's similar though, and to not be, nope, that's the easiest decision ever. I think that's the easiest thing to do, to say, this is the easiest decision, don't do it. And to make sure that it's been thought through before a knee-jerk reaction decision's made.
Mr. Supervisor, call the question, please.
Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hertzberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0. Okay, number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes. Come on up.
Good evening again, Logan Tisdale. In the 1928 campaign slogan, Herbert Hoover, who was the 31st President of the United States, this was his slogan, a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. Maybe we might hear the 2020 election slogan, pot in every pot and more cars than your garage can hold. I'm not trying to be facetious, but we face a real problem in this community, in this state, and this nation. We have opened a door which may not be able to be closed. I think 11/6/2018 will be a date that will be one of the darkest days in the state of Michigan. Never in my wildest dream did I ever think that Michigan would want to legalize marijuana and its recreational use in this state. I don't see how smoking dope and recreation can be mentioned in the same sentence. Maybe I have to research the meaning of the word recreation. If Will Rogers said he never met a man he did not like, I would say I never met a man on dope that I did like. The cost of the decision of the voters of 11/6 will yet to be determined, but I believe the cost will be in human lives. Death, sorrow, pain, and suffering will be experienced. Many will be by the innocent. It will affect our children and our children's children. No longer will Michigan be pure Michigan. It will not help our economy and will cause our highways to become even more dangerous than they already are. Last year, 1,000 people lost their lives on the roads of this state. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers will have to add another D to the MAD logo. Mothers Against Drugged Drunk Drivers might be the appropriate logo now. Might be melodramatic? I don't think so. Most of you were not around in the late 1960s. The drug culture then was not pretty. Rebellion was in the air and the establishment was under attack. Was marijuana the main cause? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think it helped the situation. Authority was assaulted. As a police officer during that period, I was called pig, mother, I'll leave out the rest of that, and names I never even heard before. I had people spit in my face. I've arrested armed individuals trafficking dope. I have seen people drugged on pot, crack, and paint fumes. Drug addiction affects the addict, their families, friends, and everyone around them. Why bother having DARE programs and drug rehabilitation facilities if we promote drug use? What are we thinking? God help us. In fact, he's the only one that can. That's my heart's cry tonight. I've seen this stuff firsthand. Maybe many of you have not. Drug use affects everybody. The people steal things. I had my patrol car broken into in Detroit, right in front of the Detroit courthouse. Somebody smashed out my window, stole the state police CD on the front thing there and ran off. What was he going to do with a CB radio? Well, he's probably going to sell it and use it for drugs. This is back in 1976. I tell you, when I saw that it passed, it just like, it slayed me. It really did. I don't want to see it in this community, really. I don't. I don't want to see establishments where they can sell this stuff, where people can go in there and just buy it freely. And we have enough people out there getting killed because of drunk drivers, and believe me, I'm not in favor of that. I never met a drunk I really liked. They defecate in their pants, they pee their pants, and they sit in my patrol car and it stinks for 3 days. That's the kind of people I've had to deal with. Maybe you haven't had to do that, but I've seen it on a first-hand basis. It's not fun. And to see that in this community, and to think that they moved into a place here where we're right on the border of Ohio where that's prohibited, and if they start coming into Michigan, we're going to have an influx of people coming into this state, which maybe we don't want. And we're right on the border. If I lived up in Sault Ste. Marie, it wouldn't bother me that much. But I live right on the border, and I've lived on the border of the state of Michigan for many years of my life. I lived in Niles, which is on the border of Indiana, South Bend, and now I've lived here in Toledo, or on the border of Toledo here in Ohio. So being on the border of the state is not always pretty, especially if the state is different than we are. So I hope that we keep this in place, and I hope that we never, ever in this township establish a place where they can sell it legally. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Gail Kane, 105.6 West Temperance. We are vulnerable because it passed, whether the state be Michigan or Ohio, and the financial greed is part of that driving force. If dope is what we need to be happy, it is a sad day in today's world. But then again, look at this. We've got rants on Facebook, which are considered entertainment. It just goes to the status, to the level of people today. Additionally, I want to comment on the EDC. I'm happy to hear that we are going to put some of our own residents on. That was part of my concern. I believe we should have residents that are on it. I believe the conflict with Ms. Nussbaum is because she is involved with the Lewis Avenue Corridor Committee. Not necessarily active, but she's there routinely as a guest. And given that they have bought up a lot of the businesses in the downtown district with the intent of tearing them down and rebuilding, I would be concerned that her directions of the EDC will focus on that. That puts a profit into her pocket, into her business pocket. That is not considered a, what do you want to call it, an acceptable method of madness. It is my understanding through the MTA that you do not get to profit because you're given and are privy to information before the rest of the world, especially when one of the buildings that was bought by this company was taken from a resident who had put in a bid to start his own business. So this is where my concern is with this. It's not that I'm anti the development. The Temperance Action Committee came up with a study. It wasn't done because we're flukes or we come up with these crazy ideas, and we certainly don't start rumors. We don't have a need to. I don't have to do that to get attention.
Ms. Keene, could you direct your comments to the chair,
I'm
please?
directing my comments to the board. And so therefore, I do believe that there's concern here. This is a conflict. So luckily, we've got some of their own residents that are on that. And additionally, I also take offense to being said that I have spread rumors. You just admitted it, that your phones are turned over. And when I walk into the township and I hear laughing and joking in the assessing department, and they're walking around and they're talking about, well, I sent you that email, come take a look at this picture, and laughing and joking, no, that's not taking care of business. So I don't have a need, Mr. Peroni, to lie. I don't have a need to spread rumors, and I don't have a need to pat myself on the back for anything that the Temperance Action Committee has achieved, because that wasn't our goal. We're community-oriented, not self-oriented.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Mark Ellsworth, 1421 Winding Way in Temperance. I'd like to address something that happened during the last political cycle, and that was the breaking of the Hatch Act. And the Hatch Act gets broke a lot, in today's society. Paul, I don't care if you wear Greg Moore's hat around, that doesn't bother me, but one of the things that the Hatch Act states is that you're not supposed to use your political offices to promote another person. And whether you wear your hat or his hat, or I don't care about that. But I do have an issue when somebody runs a full-page ad, and a lot of these people didn't even give him permission to put their names. Yeah, they supported him maybe, but to run a full-page ad with all these politicians on the back, and the one I'm concerned about is our ordinance officers. Both of them supported him. And I had somebody come to me 5 days before the election, or 5 days before we were allowed to put out signs, and wanted to know why Greg was allowed to put his signs out. And I told him to call the ordinance officers. This is before this ad. And they said he told them in my place of business that you could put a sign in your property. That wasn't a problem. But I didn't know Greg owned property all up and down Lewis Avenue. So he was doing something illegal. I know when we get our paperwork from Trudy, it says right in there you can only put them out 30 days before. And to this date, and you've all driven around township, you all know, Greg still has signs everywhere. His little blue signs are down on the corner of Smith and Secor. They're at the end of Summerfield Road. They're all over the place. Tell him to pick up his signs, man. We only have so much time to get our signs afterwards, and his signs are still everywhere. That's it, man. I just want everybody to follow the rules for the next election cycle, and he shouldn't be allowed to, even though the ordinance officers support him, he should follow the rules like everybody else. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Comments from board members. Mr. Steiner?
Just real short tonight, our thoughts go out to Ms. Tinberry and her family in their time of sorrow. And everybody have a happy Thanksgiving and be safe.
Mr. Clements?
I'll echo what Mr. Steiner said. I want to tell Craig, welcome to the board. And also just wanted to make a note. I know our fire chief has already looked at this, but one of the potential things that's going to affect this community with recreational marijuana now being legal on an individual basis is there are going to be a number of homes that now are going to constitute an additional risk for health and safety. And I want to make sure that we as a board and as a community are very aware of that and do absolutely everything we can to protect the adjacent neighbors, to protect the individual homeowner, and to ensure that we don't, inadvertently create a can of worms here that we're going to have a very difficult time going back and fixing if we get too far down the road. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Montry?
I don't have anything really, just thanks for just the people that supported me and just the welcoming from the board.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
Two things, one business and one personal. The business one is to inform folks, if they don't already know, that their winter tax bills will be mailed out around the 1st of December. That's not very many days from now.
Merry Christmas to you.
And, and Merry Christmas to you too, right? Those bills are due by February 14th, 2019. After that date, the state requires us to add penalties and interest, and we'd rather not have folks fall into that trap. So just be looking out in your mailbox. The personal item is, and I asked for a couple seconds here to bring this up. It has to do with Thanksgiving. My youngest daughter went to Northwestern University, and one of the classes she had to take was a philosophy class, and I think the guy's name was Nietzsche, and he was saying, there is no God, there is no this, there is no that. And my daughter was the only one in the room that argued back and forth with him. And after that lecture was over, and he said it many, many times, there is no God, blah, 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 blah. He said, oh, by the way, have a happy Thanksgiving. And she said, who do we thank? I've never forgotten that.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Just want to remind everyone that the Township Hall will be closed Thursday and Friday, November 22nd and 23rd for Thanksgiving. Welcome, Craig, to the board. And that the Samaria tree lighting is November 23rd at 7 p.m. at Samaria Park. And then the library's tree lighting is December 3rd. And want to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving. That's it.
Okay. Well, gosh, everybody else is short. I'll keep mine short, too. Had a meeting with the Bedford Community Foundation today. Wanted to learn more about what they do and what they're about. What a great organization. Got a lot of information from them today. So I just want to give a shout out to them. I'll be doing a Facebook post about it and kind of getting the word out on mine as much as I can for them. Mr. Francis and I attended the meeting for the Federal Aid Committee. Very, very interesting meeting this year. Bedford Township is getting definitely their fair shake on roads that'll be getting maintenanced and mill and filled. We have a 3-year update right here. But we couldn't get around the question that the state is underfunded $76 billion for the roads. And they ask for more information from MDOT, for our grants that we're getting to make it more cost prohibitive. They keep adding more and more and more for us to do, and we get less and less money. So, so we had a lot of questions. Paul and I shook them up in there and really with SEMCOG and MDOT, but we are getting, you were represented well with myself and Paul there. We are getting a lot of projects from MDOT and from SEMCOG, so I'm excited about that. I just wanted to update everybody on the Blizzard Fest. These gals have been working their tails off since January, and now they're meeting 2 days a week, 3 days a week to get the final touches in. It's really exciting to knowing that everything's going to be happening them 2 days, from the ice skating rink to the horse-drawn carriage rides, the live nativity, the movies, the vendors, pictures with Santa, and they're not missing any details. Coming in the next week or so, there'll be a big giant mailbox out in front of Township Hall for kids to come drop their letters off to Santa. So I'm sitting back in the meetings and I'm like, wow, you guys aren't missing anything. I mean, they're decorating the whole church. They're actually wanting to decorate the front of the Township Hall for when the Santa's mailbox is here. So I mean, it's really cool everything they're doing. So I'm really excited about that. I just want to talk real quick about the ordinance. First of all, the ordinance department treats everybody the same, no matter what, straight across the board. Typically during sign season, where it's campaign season, they get a lot of calls and about signs and this and that and the other, and it's just they treat everybody the same. But I will say this, we did hire a temporary person to cover the gaps. The fire department can't handle all the extra burning calls, and neither can the sheriff's department. So we did hire somebody just for the next few weeks, month. I did send out information to the board just to cover them time calls. It's frustrating when the fire department has to go to illegal burns when the ordinance department can handle it. They have plenty of other stuff to do with real calls, and so we're trying to fill the gaps in there. I'm not saying they won't go on them. I'm just saying they have better time to be served than doing that. So his name is Rex Krieger, and I sent out the information. So other than that,
Mr. Peroni?
Yep.
One thing I did forget, since you brought it up, it reminded me. When we do go forward in the spring, when we have to look at potential assistance for the position in ordinance because of some of the fire issues and the calls they have to make, I think it might be a good idea to look at, maybe talk to some of our firefighters that could fill that gap. Somebody with some fire experience and general knowledge, maybe let them work those extra hours, and you might have a couple people to be able to work different shifts, and so you got, maybe even a lot better coverage. So I think that's a good idea.
No, that's a great idea, and we definitely look at that. This was one of them situations where we got a ton of calls about illegal burns, and we're just like, man, we gotta react on this. Rex has been volunteering with us in the supervisor's department already on a lot of the initiatives we have going on. We're extremely busy, so he's been helping out there, and so he filled a need in this area, so it's working out good. But yeah, that's a great idea. We definitely look at that in the spring if it's something we want to continue on. Other than that, if no further comments, we stand adjourned.